fishing industry, but we're also home to an awful lot of marine animals and wildlife, including the incredible dolphins and porpoise that we get regularly around our shores. And together, I want to talk today about how we're working together with the fishing industry to try and come up with solutions to stop them accidentally catching these gorgeous animals in their fishing nets. The fishermen don't want to do it. From a conservation point of view, we don't want them to be caught in those nets. So it's coming up with a solution that works for everybody. So just to put it into context, really, as Jen said, this is all part of Cornwall Wildlife Trust work. I've been managing the marine programme, the Living Seas programme within the Trust for over 20 years now, hence the grey hair and the wrinkles. But this work all fits into our vision, and that's mainly about how wildlife is going to recover, how we want to see it thriving in our Cornish waters, how it can adapt to the pressures that generally us as humans are putting onto that wildlife, and particularly in current climate, about climate change. And crucially, it's about making people care. And we do that through a range of work. And with our little team, it's an amazing little team, but we do an awful lot of work to help protect Cornwall's seas and coastline. We do that through raising awareness. Unless people understand and know what's out there, they're not going to help to work with us for better protection. And we do a lot of that campaigning work, lobbying. I do a lot of advocacy work, discussions with decision makers, and this fishing interaction and work fits into that. But we can't do that without data. So all of this is based on data, and I'll give you a bit of an overview of how we can collect some of that as well as we go through the talk. So all of this talk that I'm going to give today on potential solutions to bycatch, and one in particular, which is the pinger, which we'll come on to, fits into the theme that Jen mentioned earlier, is of creating a new normal. We've had a tough few months for many of us with lockdown and the issues that has given us both personally, but also for work. And we now need to come out of that and use it as an opportunity. And that's really where Cornwall Wildlife Trust is trying to go, to see the opportunities that we now have and work even more proactively and more positively to create that new normal and make sure that some of these things that have come into place fairly rapidly, by default really, because of the current situation, can be rolled on. And part of that is the food for thought. And I know Matt gave a talk last Friday or a couple of Fridays ago about his project, the Cornwall Good Seafood Guide. And this fits in really neatly with my talk. The Good Seafood Guide is all about promoting sustainable fish, encouraging consumers to be well informed when they're choosing their fish and to make good choices, but also to encourage best practice within the fishing industry. We really want our fishers to stand out on a national but also a global scale. What a lot of our fishermen are doing locally is good, but it's on a small scale. We want that to roll out. And one of those key areas of work is the element of bycatch. So there is entanglement of many marine animals, seabirds as well, turtles, but particularly cetaceans that get caught in our inshore nets. And we need to find a solution that's going to work for both the animals, for their long-term protection, but also for the fishermen. Otherwise, it's just not going to be taken up. So that's what I'm going to talk to today. So it's really about this. We've got in Cornwall a really vibrant and really diverse fishing fleet. These are beam trawlers that are fishing out of Newlyn. But we've got a very, very intense inshore netting fleet as well. And they generally work within the 0 to 6 miles limit. And they fish with these static nets, which I'll explain in a little bit more detail later on. But that fishing activity interacts with these animals. And we get sometimes huge numbers of particularly common dolphins that come around our Cornish shores. And they're after generally the same feed fish, or the feed fish of the fish that the fishermen are there. So we end up with this interaction. It's not the fishermen's fault, they're not targeting these animals, but the animals are the fishermen are in the same area, and sadly we end up with this. And the consequence is animals getting caught up in fishing nets, and we as a coastal community end up seeing a lot of marine mammals and cetaceans stranding on our shores. It's not a nice sight. Fishermen don't want to do it either, and it ruins their nets. It's a financial implication as well as a moral one. These guys, a lot of them see themselves as, you know, guardians of the sea, and they don't want to catch the dolphins in their nets. So it's a joint solution we need to find. So what about the data? Well, in Cornwall, we've been running the Cornwall Marine Strandings Network for many, many years now. And it's all about how to gather the evidence so that we can start investigating the cause of death for some of these marine mammals. We've got a hotline that's manned 24 hours, 7 days a week by some brilliant volunteers. And that number is down there. Enter it into your phones now for those of you who aren't in the network and don't have that in your phone. And please do report in anything you find on the beach, anything stranded, not just dolphins and porpoise, but we want to have records of anything. It helps us to build up this picture that we can then take active conservation measures for. The network is coordinated by Cornwall Wildlife Trust now, but it's really run by volunteers. So we've got a huge network of volunteers that go out, and through that recording process, it helps us to learn not only about the ecology and the biology of these incredible animals, which you only catch a glimpse of when they're out at sea and live, but it also gives us an idea of the impacts to those animals and the health of our marine environment generally. And bycatch is just one of the issues that affects these animals, but I won't go into any of the other details today because it's a whole big subject, as many of you know. So I love this photo, and it's just to highlight that this has been a historic problem. This is a fin whale that washed up on Looe Island, which is now a Wildlife Trust nature reserve, just off the coast of Looe. And it washed up in the early 1900s, and just shows that our records date back, well, we've actually got records from the 1300s, from historics records, but we've been actively collecting them since 1913. And this is one of the earliest ones. And this animal was actually blown up, and I love this story, that it was blown up on the island, but actually managed to smash a whole load of windows in Looe town itself on the mainland. Not sure that would really happen today, but just to give you a context. The Strandings Network as it runs now is all part of CSIP, which is the Cetacean Strandings Investigation Programme. And that's run nationally and is funded by DEFRA, but it's a partnership project. So it's coordinated by ZSL, which is the Zoological Society of London, in partnership with the Natural History Museum, the Scottish Marine Animal Stranding Scheme, Marine Environmental Monitoring in Wales, and us down here in Cornwall. And I'll explain why we are such key partners in that in just a couple of slides' time. We couldn't do that work in Cornwall without a lot of other help, not only just our volunteers, but we work really closely with ERCIS, which is the Environmental Record Centre for Cornwall and Isles of Scilly, and they manage all of the data that comes in and helps us to analyse that and send it out in the right format to the right people. We work really closely with British Divers Marine Life Rescue and Cornwall Seal Group Research Trust, both for gathering in information and working in parallel the seal life stories and matching IDs with animals that strand, and with SUE and the Seal Group's database. And Dan and the Marine Life Divers manage all of the live strandings, but we work very, very closely together. The University of Exeter are also part of our network down here, and they help us with the postmortems. And that's all carried out at their Penryn campus. So, as I said, it's really run by volunteers. We've got over 170 trained volunteers now, and those volunteers go down in all winds and weathers to examine, to record, and to photograph animals in situ on the beaches. They also collect external evidence when they can. Most of that is photographically recorded. But that evidence, which we call BEEP, it's Bycatch Evidence Evaluation Protocol, helps to back up some of the post-mortem work that we get. As you can see on the right-hand side there, that's James Barnett, our veterinary pathologist who's undertaking one of the postmortems down at Penryn campus at the University of Exeter. And that's all done under the CSIP licence. But we're only afforded 25 animals a year under that licence. And when we get big numbers of animals washing ashore, that's a very small percentage of animals that we can actually get a full post-mortem on. So the BEEP work, the evidence evaluation from the external injuries on the beach, is a crucial part of the work that we do. And that helps to build the evidence base and the data that I can then use to lobby government and statutory agencies to say this is a bigger problem than just from the post-mortem evidence. That's just to remind me to highlight that there is all of this detail of the evidence and the strandings reports all available online. So this is our 2018 one. I know Abby is working hard on the 2019 report, which should be out hopefully sometime soon, but that will be coming. But all of the reports are there if anyone wants to have a deeper delve into what we do regularly find. And that goes into the BEEP work a little bit more detail as well. So this is just to give you an idea of the figures and the numbers we're looking at. This is just a snapshot from 1995 up to 2019, but it shows a couple of the really big peaks that we've had in recent years. So the really big one we had in 2003, 2004, we believe was probably due to pair trawling, particularly for bass in the English Channel and off our coast. There's a lot of lobbying done at that time to change regulation, but it wasn't enough, and it only dealt with one specific fishery. And this shows that the issue of bycatch hasn't gone away, and the issue of strandings rather. I just want to also highlight that while we've had really big numbers in recent years, this is just 10% or approximately 10% of the animals that we believe are dying at sea. From drift modelling and other experiments we've done with animals sinking and bloating and things, all sounds really horrible at early in the morning on a Friday. But we know from those trials that only about 10% of animals that die at sea actually wash ashore. So these are quite conservative figures. So if we get 250 animals washing ashore, that's only 10%. We're talking 2,500 animals potentially dying per year out around the Cornish seas. So it's a substantial number. Also want to say that we don't think that these numbers are effort biased anymore. We've been running the Cornwall Marine Strandings Network for many years, as I've said, with a fantastic Stella Turk who started in the early 90s, coordinating all of this. We then took it over as the Wildlife Trust with a couple of brilliant dedicated volunteers in 2003. And the effort of volunteers and reporting has been fairly steady for that duration. So these numbers aren't effort biased, and we believe they are very true numbers. Interestingly, when as part of the national picture, Cornwall, which is why we're part of that national CSIP partnership, and we're the only county that's named in that partnership, it's because we get about a quarter to a third of all marine strandings in the country, in the UK. So, for example, in 2018, there were 1,000 stranded cetaceans in UK. 464 of those were in England, and 249 of those were in Cornwall. So it shows the importance of Cornwall in gathering that data, but also that we are a hotspot. From the post-mortem analysis in particular, it shows that bycatch is an issue. It's an issue nationally, but from that national picture, harbour porpoise are bycaught around the coast, but with a very high prevalence in the southwest. And that right-hand side one is showing the short-beak common dolphin map of bycatch. And that shows, you can see that Cornwall in the southwest is where all of the bycaught common dolphins are coming in. And that's primarily because of the movement of the animals, but also because of the type of fishery that we have operating in our inshore waters. And this is what we see regularly on our beaches. It's a real common scene. And whereas before, when I mentioned the pair trawling issue, that was government felt it was dealt with at a European level with various regulations. the issue of stranding hasn't gone away, and we are regularly seeing this with still big numbers, 250 or so animals a year. And it's predominantly from inshore netting. And by that I mean this monofilament set netting or tangle netting. It catches harbour porpoise, but over recent years, harbour porpoise bycatch seems to have been decreasing, and we're getting more and more numbers of common dolphin getting caught in these nets. And that's the evidence that is underpinning our work on the pinger trials. We needed to find a solution to try and stop these animals getting caught in fishing nets. We had a lot of discussion with the fishing industry, and we needed to start trialling possible solutions. Now this work started in 2009, so we're not talking about new work. It's been going on for a long time. And the first trials that we did were between 2009 and 2011 as part of this project, the Sequest Net Safe project. And it was a bigger project. It looked at our sightings work, it did some acoustic monitoring work, and it also looked at some of our strandings assessment and helped to get the BEEP protocol, the Bycatch Evidence Evaluation Protocol, up to scratch as well. But crucially, it was about trialling some of these pingers. And the first one we trialled was the Aquamark pinger. It was one that was seemed to be high up on the market at the time. It was being used in various other fisheries globally. So we gave it a shot on our local fisheries. The results showed that the device was effective. It reduced bycatch by about 48%. Or reduced harbour porpoise activity around the net, I should say, by 48%. So it was effective as a bycatch mitigation tool, but we had serious concerns about its practicality, as did the fishermen. The casing is very, very hard casing, and it has fractured. And when you're on a fishing boat, hauling things under pressure, fracturing plastic could cause quite serious injury. There was also quite a strong concern from us about the battery life. As you can see from that picture, it's a sealed unit. So once the battery runs out, that's a discardable unit and has to just be thrown away and a new one bought. So that not only adds to cost for the fishermen, but it also means that it's a throwaway item. So as a conservation charity, we couldn't condone that and support that as a long-term solution. One of the good things out of this initial trial was that the methodology that we used was written up and peer-reviewed in this journal, in the JCRM journal. And it was a new methodology of looking at bycatch. And it's one that we've continued, and other people around the world have now continued. Because the level of bycatch is actually quite low to observe on board. So we're talking, a few animals per year. Per boat. That's not going to give you the statistical power, the robustness to get effective stats done and an effective result in the short term. So we used cetacean monitoring devices, and I'll explain how that was rigged up in a minute. But that methodology of using acoustics rather than observed bycatch is now a recognised methodology. So it's a real positive out of that first bit of work. So our second trial was with this new device. We worked closely with FishTech company based in Totnes in Devon, and they helped us to develop this banana pinger. You can see where it got its name. It was as a direct result of some of the Aquamark work that we did, and FishTech worked with us to make sure that we knew that the Aquamark was effective, but it could be more effective. So the FishTech pinger worked on the same acoustic range, which we knew worked with the porpoise in particular. It had to meet the European regulations on sound frequency and power, otherwise it wasn't going to be allowed to be used on fishing nets under certain legal regulations and requirements. But crucially, we had to make it more practical. So it had to be lighter for the fishermen to use, had to be flexible, which is why it's this banana shape, so that it can go through the net haulers. So that on fishing boats, they've got these big round haulers where the net comes up through, and it helps to fold the net back into the bins. The pingers have to go through that, so they have to be this one is flexible and squishy and formed so that it rolls over that hauler quite easily. They had to be cheap for the fishermen to actually buy into it and use. And from our last trials, they had to be reusable batteries. So you can see on that picture that there's an inside section that you can just pop out, and that's where you put the replaceable batteries in. So it's a 1 unit for set cost, and then it's a couple of quid every couple of years for a renewable battery. So we wanted to trial these pingers in a real fishery to see if they were going to work. So we did a real-time fishery trial, and that was to test the effectiveness of this new device and to see if it was going to actually work at deterring the dolphins and porpoise away from the nets, but also to address the practicality in terms of whether fishermen could use them in their normal fishing practices. We also did what we called the cycling pinger trial, and that's crucial to this whole story, and the sort of the linchpin, I suppose, as well as the practicalness and the effectiveness. The cycling pinger trial was really to investigate the behavioural effects of the pinger. We needed to know if putting this noise into the marine environment was going to either displace the animals, so scare them enough so they wouldn't come up anywhere near the nets, or whether it was going to act as a dinner bell, which we'd heard, and people were saying, oh, that's what's going to happen. These are intelligent creatures. They're going to learn that pinging noise is an attractant. That means there's fish in the net. They'll get more tangled. So this pinger trial was really the crucial bit about behaviour that hadn't been done any time before. Like I said before, the methodology that we used was unique in that it doesn't rely on actual bycatch and observed bycatch. Like I said, that was too low to statistically prove whether these things were effective over a short time. We would have to do that observer methodology for several years, and we needed to get results quicker than that. So we used the C-pod, and it's a highly complicated bit of kit. Looks like a bit of drain pipe, but inside that is some really, really high-tech stuff that I don't understand. But Nick Tregenza is the mind behind this with his company Chelonia down in Mousehole, and it's essentially a fully automated static acoustic monitoring device. So it records all of the harbour porpoise and cetacean clicks, so the trains of clicks that these animals leave when they're swimming and feeding in the area, and from that record we can pull out activity, levels of activity, and currently now species. So it's a really clever bit of kit, and it helps us to infer changes in behaviour of these animals around the nets. So in terms of how we attach these pingers to the nets, pingers do like they say on the tin, they ping. So they emit a randomised acoustic ping into the sea, but at a very, very low level. I mean, we're talking about a level of noise that is about 100 times lower than the porpoise click itself at close range, and about 1,000 times quieter than a standard boat sonar. So these are very, very small clicks. The pinger on a set net like this were spaced at 200-metre intervals on the bottom rope, the lead line. The net is a static net which floats in the water with a floating headline and then the mooring buoys at each end. And then there was an acoustic monitoring device, so the C-pod at one end of each of these nets. We worked with 4 fishing vessels, mainly doing tangle netting, a type of this set net fishery, and that works with 10.5-inch monofilament net, so quite large spaced net. And those boats were from mainly from the Helford, Mevagissey and Newlyn. Each boat had one set of nets with pingers and one set of nets without pingers, so that was our control. And we ran this trial for 8 months, and that control meant that we can statistically analyse the effectiveness of the pinger in set times and set locations, and gave us that comparable data that we really needed. So in terms of the real-time fishery results and the sort of the practicalities, we had 160 soak days of net, both with and without pingers, that we could analyse, which was a substantial amount of data. We did have gaps in that, which you'll see in a moment, but it was a good amount to work with and would give us statistical significance. In terms of the practicality, the fishermen kept logs throughout their trial, and the handling of these pingers were good. Once they were on the nets, they stayed on the nets, they didn't pop out. We managed to get rid of any initial teething problems with things like buttonholing, where they dropped down through the nets in the bins. So we reconfigured how the pingers were put onto the nets, and they worked very effectively. They go through the haulers fine. There was no breakages, and the battery stayed intact within the casing. The battery life was good, which is essential. And there's also a little LED light on that pinger at the very sort of narrow end. So it can tell you when, or tell the fisherman when the pinger is on and when it's active, and when the battery is going to wear out and need replacing. We had some issues with that light, where fishermen believed that light was attracting seals and other fish species when it was in the water. So we worked with Fish Tech to make sure that was amended, so the light only came on when the pinger was out of the water, so that the fishermen could see it on the boat and check the battery life, but as soon as it went in the water, that light went off. So there's no impact on seals or other species who are more light sensitive and could be using that as a sensor to come towards the nets. Because the last thing we wanted to do was, potentially start getting less dolphin bycatch and porpoise bycatch, but increase seal bycatch because of the tool and the device that we were using. So that was an important bit of work that we needed to make sure we weren't doing. In conjunction with this, we did do a lot of work on seals to make sure that the pinger itself was outside of the audible range of seals, so that it wasn't going to work as an attractant or a deterrent. So the seals don't hear it. So seal activity is ongoing around the boats, but that is another separate issue to the cetacean bycatch issue. So in terms of practicalities, we believe it was pretty successful. In terms of effectiveness, as you can see on this graph, there was a bit of a gap in fishing activity between November and January. But if you can see, the red line is when the pinger is absent, so that's nets without the pingers, and the blue line is nets with the pingers. So you can see that there's quite a dramatic difference. When the pinger is on, so the blue line, there's far less cetacean activity and number of clicks from those animals, again, recorded on that CPOD. When that was all analysed, it showed that the reduction in those clicks from nets with pingers was 18%. And that correlates to a reduction in bycatch risk of 82%. So that's one of the most effective bycatch reduction tools on the market, and it still is, and this was done in 2013. So that bycatch reduction of 82% is a highly effective number, and means that the pinger is an effective tool. So moving on to the cycling pinger and this behavioural element, we knew we had an effective pinger that worked at deterring dolphins, but we needed to know if it was going to be rolled out to a wider fishery, if that deterrent was impacting the cetaceans' behaviour in any way. So we had a single modified pinger, which was working on a 21-hour cycle, and that was to remove any tidal or diurnal, so daily impacts. So it would randomise itself over the duration of the 8 months that it was deployed. So essentially we had a mooring rope fixed in 40 metres of water with one pinger in the middle of it in the water column, and a CPOD to record activity right next to that pinger. 100 metres away, we had another rope with the same configuration of pinger and CPOD to record it. And that was to see the difference in movements and any activity when there wasn't any pinger on that rope. And from those cycling pinger trials, these are some of the results we've got. And I love this picture because it's so visual. So if you look at the bottom, there's a line that goes up and down in like turret formation like that. When that black line is on, it's up, and you can see there's far less purple coloration and movement in that colour above that line. The purple coloration and the movement is porpoise clicks. So when the pinger is on, when you've got that turret top of pinger on, you've got hardly any porpoise clicks. And then when the pinger goes off, the porpoise clicks come back immediately. So that visually, even from people who can't read the sequences of clicks and can't understand the technology behind it, it is really visual to say that actually it works. When the pinger's on, there's no porpoise clicks. Porpoises aren't there. But when the pinger goes off, they come back straight away. So that immediately to me says there's no displacement. They're not getting scared away, it's not too noisy, and they don't then come back immediately. When we looked at this in more detail, the click detections fall by 27%, which is very similar to the real-time fishery of a fall in 18%. But obviously this is just one pinger rather than a sequence on a net. So it is highly effective. The issue we had at the end of 2013, 2014, when this was all written up and we produced our report, was that we were presenting it from the NGO's point of view. We had fishery buy-in, but the fisheries had to accept that there was a bycatch problem, which they were unwilling to do to government because of threat of statutory regulation coming in. Government were also unwilling to accept our behavioural trials and behavioural evidence because it wasn't peer reviewed. Now I won't go into all of the detail with that because I can quite happily get on my soapbox about this issue. It's very valuable evidence. It was statistically assessed, but it wasn't written up in a peer review paper because that takes time and costs. And as a Wildlife Trust, we just didn't have that at the time. Thankfully, in recent years, so starting in 2019, we managed to work with Exeter University with some funding from the Whale and Dolphin Conservation and managed to get this evidence that we collected assessed statistically by a team at the uni and get this evidence published. And this is the results that were published in May this year. So it went out in the Frontiers for Marine Science paper. The link is up on the top there. I think it's on the next slide as well. And it basically backed up exactly what we'd found in our initial analysis. So there was a very small range of pinger effects. There was rapid reoccupation, no evidence of habituation, and no long-term effects. Essentially, it looked at the same stats as we did, but much more conservatively, looking at the two graphs on that left-hand side, and it's the probability of harbour porpoise click detections between when the pinger was on and the pinger was off. The statistics behind it are complicated and we don't really need to know. All we need to know is that it backed up the assessment that we initially did, and it proved that that there is no behavioural effects. So concluding that bit of work, are these pingers, these specific pingers, the banana pinger, effective? Yes. The porpoises were 37% less likely to be found close to an active pinger, and that really backed up our real-time trials. Now that 37% is a lot more conservative than our numbers, but it was just down to the very rigorous and conservative way that they were doing the stats to make sure there was no loopholes in it, but it's backed up what we found. What's the extent of this effect? Well, it's very, very localised. from those 2 ropes that I said in the cycling pinger methodology, so one had the pinger and one was 100 meters away, the porpoise detections dropped to just 9% in that rope 100 meters away. So it's a very, very localized effect of the pinger. We're not emitting a big loud noise that scares animals away for meters, hundreds of meters, talking of very, very localized. Is there any habituation? So is there a dinner bell effect? Are these animals learning that this pinger noise means that there's a net and potential feed fish in the water? No, there's absolutely no evidence of any decrease in the pinger effectiveness over the 8-month trial that we did. And that's a significant length of time to be doing this sort of trial. We totally agree that, over 3, 4, 5 years, this may change, but over that initial 8-month period with intelligent animals, we would expect from other literature that if there was going to be a decrease in or an element of habituation, that would have been seen, and we saw none. Was there any displacement? Again, no. And that's like the initial visual graph that I showed you. As soon as the pingers were switched off, the animals return and there's no delay. So it means that as soon as the nets are hauled out of the water, the animals can return and feed in that area, and we're not moving them out of feeding grounds or out of their usual area. They are only deterred for a very small area while the fishing nets are in there. So it was really, really positive results. There's essentially no behavioural effects of the banana pinger. And that is the crucial bit of evidence that we needed to now lobby government, because they were saying there's all of these issues on behaviour hadn't been tested. And now it's in peer review paper and we've got the proof. So we've been published, like I said, in May this year. That's the link if anybody wants to go and have a full read of the paper. And it now means that we can circulate this to DEFRA, to the statutory agencies and to government, so that it can help inform the future bycatch mitigation discussion. So just to wrap up, we believe banana pingers are suitable for deployment in our Cornish inshore set net fishery. There's more work to be done, which I'll come on to. There's a real strong pinger effect, and that means that the effect of these pingers is good, and it translates into a greatly reduced in some cases, bycatch risk of, like I said, up to 82%. And who knows, that could be higher, depending on the fishing practice and the cetacean activity in the area. And the crucial bit, there's no behavioural effects, no habituation, no displacement. So this pinger, from a conservation point of view, is the only suitable one on the market that we would recommend and support. So what next? What are we recommending? We are fully aware that this was a relatively small trial, so we want to see wider trials of banana pingers happening, and that is starting to happen globally, to assess the effectiveness of these pingers in different gears, targeting different fish in different fishing areas. We're only looking at one type of fishery in a couple of small areas in Cornwall. We also need to look at the effect of pingers on dolphins. When we were doing the trial, the CPOD that we were using couldn't really determine the dolphin activity as effectively as its version, whatever it might be now, the FPOD, which can now determine dolphin activity as well. So we need to do some more trials on dolphins, just to make sure that it works accurately for them as well. We need to raise consumer and public awareness. That's sort of what this is about, and why it's linked to the Cornwall Good Seafood Guide work, so Matt's project. We need to encourage people to be aware of the bycatch as an issue, but selecting their fish from their local fishmonger or their restaurant as being dolphin friendly. And how we do that is a whole big chunk of work. But we want to promote the vessels that are using banana pingers and sustainable practices to make their catch dolphin friendly, and then can sell it as a premium product. And that needs to be a sort of a transparent consumer chain as we go through. And that's something that we need to work on. And in the meantime, we need government support, and we need the inclusion of pingers as a bycatch mitigation tool. Now it's being discussed, but work is very, very slow at a national level. And and I'm happy to answer more questions about where we are with that in the question and answers in a minute. But government are too reluctant to use tools that we have proven are both effective and show no behavioural impacts. And we don't think that that's good enough, because in the meantime, more hundreds, if not thousands of animals are being caught in nets. So in terms of nationally, what's happening, there is the UK Dolphin and Porpoise Conservation Strategy and the UK Bycatch Initiative. And like I said just now, that they are talking about bycatch mitigation tools, and pingers are one of them, but there seems this reticence to use it as a quick solution. We're not saying that it should be used on every single net in every single fishery. We don't know if that will work yet or not. But where there is a hotspot of bycatch happening and where animals are in the area and that interaction is high, we know that pingers work, and we need a much more reactive regulatory system that allows them to be used where that issue is highlighted by the fishery. There is a Southwest pilot being trialled at the moment, but there are issues with that, and again, it's going too slowly and on far too small a scale. But we need more data, and to get that data, we need fishery engagement. So we need to get fishermen to understand that there is a link between using these mitigation devices and getting a premium product that they can sell as dolphin friendly. And that's a slow message to get out. So I just wanted to say thank you. We've got one final video in a minute, which Jen's going to, actually, if I stop this now, Jen, you can get that bit prepped. But yeah, just really say that we have got solutions now. We need to start using them to protect the animals around our shores. And we need to really start supporting and promoting and pushing for a much more sustainable fishery as our new normal. And I just wanted to finish on a little video which I think sums it up from one of the fishermen's point of view, and hopefully it runs okay via Jen's Jen's internet rather than mine.
Can you hear that okay, Ruth?
There's no commercial fisherman that wants to catch. Cause quite a bit of damage to your net, but more than the financial.
Sorry, can you hear? Could you not hear it, Ruth?
I couldn't, but it might be my end.
I'll carry on playing.
Cost of the actual net, it's the time cutting out, replacing. It takes days. Since I've used the pingers, I haven't seen one dolphin tangled in my nets. I've seen them in the bay the same day as I've hold nets, and I haven't actually caught one as bycatch since I've been using the pingers. The fish tech pingers are very robustly made. I haven't had any issues with them coming through the hauler or shooting over the stern. I don't think anybody would mind buying pingers to save a dolphin's life, and of course to save the damage to your nets that they cause. They should pay for themselves. Well, in a season, I would have thought.
Cool. So yeah, thank you. And that was from our friend Barry in Mevagissey, who did have a real big, not just him, all of the netters in Mevagissey had a real big bycatch issue a couple of years ago, and they came to us wanting a solution. And unfortunately, they're not allowed to use pingers unless they are part of the Southwest trial. And that's an issue we need to resolve, because as you heard him say, they were catching lots, several a week, and that adds up to an awful lot of animals over the course of a year. With pingers, he wasn't catching any. So the will is there. They want to use them when an issue arises. So we just need to work towards getting that up and running with DEFRA now. So thank you, and yeah, happy to take any questions.
Amazing, thank you, Ruth. That was brilliant. We have, feel free to unmute yourself. I've put it on gallery view so I can see everybody now. Or there is the chat option at the bottom as well if you wanted to just type a question. I had a question from Jenny, who has